For this message, let's talk about grief. I have experienced a lot of losses in my life, starting with my mother when I was 16 years old. My mom had always been addicted to drugs and faced a lot of trials and tribulations within her life. But even with all of that, the world would always judge her. Even if we went to the gas station, even if we went out anywhere, I could see the way people would look at her or just automatically judge her. But being a child to a mother who was a drug addict, it taught me so much. I would look at my mom like she was the strongest woman I had ever met, and she still is to this day, because sometimes you don't know somebody's backstory. You don't know everything they went through. You don't know how hard it is for them to get out of bed, and the world is so quick to judge others instead of hearing their story or understanding why did they get to that place. You might drive around and see a homeless person and think negative about them, but you never know what happened in their life to contribute to their situation. And so for me, I am just like a human advocate. I fully believe that, not everyone is given the same rights. I am just so supportive of others that don't have enough, or maybe they're going through their worst moment in their life, but you never know what's going on with someone. And so it's so important to be kind. That was just a little bit of the story with my mom. My mom, on her death certificate, said that she had died by suicide. I believe my mom was murdered. She had an ex-boyfriend in the house with her at the time, and there's a lot of things in the story that didn't add up, right? Like, he didn't call 911. He called my grandmother. And I feel like a lot of times, even with, law enforcement, when they come out and they see somebody that's been to jail, a drug addict, they don't investigate it. I feel like they just kind of throw you under the rug. And that's how I feel with my mom. So I feel like even though it does say that she died by suicide, I believe that my mom was murdered. So my mom passed, when I was 16 years old. And then my grandmother was like my rock, and it was very hard. I hadn't seen my mom for a lot of years before she passed. There was, with family members like, oh, we don't want you to see your mom. We don't want you to end up on drugs, all these different things. And to me, it didn't matter because I knew my mom's soul. I knew she was a good person. She just made the wrong decisions. But grief is never easy. It's never easy, even being at 16. I'm actually 33 now, so I'm the same age as my mom when she died, which is so weird because I remember thinking at 16, I wonder what life's gonna be like when I turn 33. And I just turned 33 2 weeks ago, and right before, in January, my grandmother had passed. So that was my rock, since losing my mom. And that whole experience with hospice, and I think as much as anticipated grief, it's a given, but that is I feel like the hardest grief. Or I feel like every grief is hard, but for me, it didn't make it any easier, if that makes sense. Even knowing what was gonna happen, it was so hard. It was so devastating. And I say all this to say that grief looks different every day. So even when I was 16 and 17 and all the years after, I always grieved my mom. I always missed her. I felt like unless somebody has experienced that, they don't understand. It's hard to just go on with life. I mean, of course, life doesn't stop, right? It could be the worst day of your life, and guess what? The sun is still gonna rise and the night is still gonna come. But it is hard in that moment when you wish the world would stop. It's not easy to be a robot and go back to school, go back to life and just act like the worst day of your life didn't happen. And so I just give so much like love and prayers to someone that's like been through grief or has, lost their mom, or anybody in their life, or even had to go on the hospice journey and be the one taking care of someone. It's very difficult, and oftentimes when we give so much of ourselves to others, we forget to take care of ourselves. And I'm guilty of that. Even with my grandma, there was so much that I had to do, and you often just put yourself last because you're taking care of someone. And so if you're on that journey and you're taking care of somebody on hospice or whatever it is, just really remember to take care of yourself and know that you're not alone. Like I said, I have experienced a lot of losses in my life. I was able to have my grandma for exactly 16 years after my mom passed, but it still doesn't make it easier. It'll be 2 months tomorrow, and I miss my mom every day. With my mom, it's been 16 years, and with my grandma, it's only been 2 months. But life doesn't really get easier. You just learn to live with it, right? Like, you just become stronger. You have days where it feels like it was like yesterday, and it's so hard to get through that day. And then you have other days where you feel okay, you can talk about it. Like this moment, I can talk about this with you guys and be okay, but maybe like tomorrow, if I were to talk about this, I'd be bawling my eyes out. So every day, grief will look different, and give yourself grace. And it's really important to surround yourself with people that have been through grief, because you can never know until you've been in those shoes. Like, you can have empathy for someone and listen to them, but it's such a different thing when you're walking those shoes. It's terrible. And I just want, to say a prayer for anyone that's going through that. And a big thing that has helped me along in my journey is joining a grief group. So at first, I'm like, what is that, But it's just a place where other people have went through losses and grief and, different situations and stories, and just ways to overcome them. Even with my grandma, I remember, which I did this when I was 16 as well, but just not wanting to do anything. Like, I could lay in the bed all day, morning and night. But that's not healthy. Like, it's okay to have an off day, like every now and again, but also you have to pick yourself up, but also in that same breath, you have to give yourself grace, because grief is heavy. It's hard to just, like I said, be a robot and get up and be like, I'm doing perfect today, how are you? Like, there has to be space and time for yourself. And so just make sure you're really holding space and time for your journey and yourself, and try to prioritize yourself in the midst of all the chaos of life and all the losses. And I think the grief group has been helping me. I recently just joined. I feel like there's a lot of things I never processed with my mom, or I just was told to be strong and keep going, which those are nice words, but when you're the person in that moment, it just seems like life's never gonna get better. And so even though, I have survived all this time, right? But definitely, like, with losing my grandmother, which was like my mom, it has brought up a lot of just different emotions to, reverting back to when I was 16. And, no matter what age you are, just make sure that you have a community that will listen to you, grieve with you, support you. Some days you might be able to tell your story, and the next day you might have a flood of tears, but both is okay. And if you ever need a prayer or you want to share your story or anything, I'm here for you. And I just wanted to say that about grief.